welcome viewers to this very special episode on what's behind the Epstein Files. The Epstein Files and the storm surrounding them continue to dominate global headlines. The latest shocker comes from the memoirs of Epstein survivor Virginia Giuffre, which include explosive allegations of rape against someone she describes as a prime minister. Giuffre also names Prince Andrew as part of Epstein's powerful circle of influence. Prince Andrew, as we know, was forced to surrender most of his royal titles in the fallout of these allegations. Joining me tonight to discuss these revelations and the Trump administration's handling of the Epstein Files are Rina Oh, a survivor, and Barry Levine, investigative journalist and an author who's been tracking the case for over 2 decades. Good evening, Rina, and good evening, Barry, and thank you very much for joining me. Let me first begin with you, Rina. We spoke earlier, and you did raise a few very sharp and evident questions that people have ducked answering. But with the latest memoirs of Virginia Giuffre that have been posthumously published, she writes, "In my years with them, they lent me out to scores of wealthy, powerful people. I was habitually used and humiliated, and in some instances choked, beaten and bloodied. I believed that I might die a sex slave. This was an elite, privileged, powerful and yet sadistic circle. Was it not?" We've spoken about it, but what do you think about the new revelations?
I have not personally witnessed any of these acts in person, but I have seen Ghislaine Maxwell's closet, and she had a lot of strange items in there. So I don't doubt that there were some nefarious activities that were taking place. And I saw this closet in Florida.
Well, I ask you this because in her memoirs, Giuffre has spoken about being raped by someone who she referred to as Prime Minister of a country. There are in the realm of, these are in the realm of allegations as of now. But would you have any insights from the circle that you've earlier spoken about?
I personally don't have insight, but I have heard other girls talk about their experience. But like I said before, I'm not here to tell their story, and I'm not going to name any names. There's a lot of liability, and it's also getting dangerous for the survivors to come out and start naming people. I think a lot of these girls, since the rally in DC and the press conference, some of them are getting death threats. They're scared right now. A lot of them stopped giving interviews. So in order to protect them, I think it's in their best interest that the girls themselves don't name these names. And I think it's up to the government, really. You know, they have these Epstein files. I know for a fact they do, because they interviewed me, the government, and they told me the information that they were looking for, and they were looking for names during my 2 interviews with the Department of Justice, the prosecutors, and the FBI.
What were they looking for? And you spoke about weird things in the cupboard. What are these weird things that you've seen?
A lot of like that sort of thing where Ghislaine was apparently doing things to the girls with. They were not nice toys. I don't want to get too graphic. I don't know who's watching, the show, but they were very scary objects. And she was very giddy about it when she showed it to me, which really creeped me out. I stayed away from Ghislaine after that. I didn't want to go near her. And I really feel sorry for those girls that traveled with her and spent a lot of time with her. I can't even imagine what she did to these girls.
Well, traumatic for sure, even hearing about it. But Barry Levine, you've covered the Epstein Files and the Epstein case for 2 decades. I just want to ask, what do you make of the memoirs that have been posthumously published? And do you really think, the indications made in there have some element of truth in there?
Well, I can tell you this. I did extensive reporting for my book, which was called The Spider, Inside the Criminal Web of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. I poured over thousands of pages of court documents and interviews, and Virginia Giuffre first told her story to a reporter from a London newspaper in 2011, in which she named more than a half dozen men that she had been trafficked to by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. At least she claimed that. She was interviewed for the first time by the FBI during that year. And it is my belief, and other experts on the case, that the results of that investigation, in which she reiterated the names of these more than half dozen very powerful men across the world that she had been trafficked to, that those names and details of that investigation are contained in the FBI files. These are the files that the Trump administration and the government thus far has refused to release.
The truth is in those files, which haven't really come out yet. But Rina, you did see the cupboard, and you're talking about the Maxwell cupboard. I sense a little bit of fear. I sense a little bit of trepidation, but I also sense a lot of bewilderment on what you saw in there. Can you tell our viewers on how scary and why were you scared when you saw these things?
It was really scary because of how happy she was when she showed it to me, and they're not things that I ever want anyone to put on my body. I don't think that's something anyone who is not into those things. They were just objects that you would use to hurt someone with, and she had an entire closet full of them. She was smiling and showing it to me, and it was very symbolic of what she could potentially do to me. And after I left, went back home, I started wondering about Ghislaine, and I didn't want to spend any time with her. And I saw some other girls around her, and I always wondered what she did with them. She was so close to some of these girls. They traveled with her. And I just stayed away from her altogether. She is not being completely transparent in her, in how she fits into this picture. She wasn't just organizing appointments and bringing girls and recruiting girls. She was doing a lot more darker things. That's my belief, because I saw that cupboard, that closet. I think she was hurting girls in a physical way.
So when Virginia writes in her book, and she talks about a person, she writes, "He repeatedly choked me until I lost consciousness and took pleasure in seeing me fear for my life. Horrifically, the Prime Minister laughed when he hurt me and got more excited when I begged him to stop. Afterward, I tearfully begged Epstein not to send me back to him. I got down on my knees and pleaded with him. I don't know if Epstein feared the man or if he owed him a favor, but he wouldn't make any promises, coldly stating that the politician's brutality, you'll get that sometimes." Does that make your skin crawl?
It absolutely makes my skin crawl. I don't know this politician. I didn't meet any politicians when I was around Jeffrey and Ghislaine, but I can say for sure that she absolutely probably groomed some of these girls to tolerate that type of behavior. And she showed me the objects that she potentially used on them. I've read about Ghilan's past. I heard that this is part of her childhood and upbringing. I've read stories about her own family. So it doesn't really surprise me that she went from being a very young victim to a very malicious victimizer and predator. She's a female sex predator in so many ways. She wasn't just bringing young girls to Jeffrey Epstein. I think she enjoyed and was very sadistic in their abuse.
Well, the evidence that you talk about, have you spoken about that evidence? Have you described that closet, the mystery closet, to anyone?
I described the mystery closet when I met with the Department of Justice, the prosecutors of the Maxwell case. They were also investigating Jeffrey Epstein for decades. And, FBI, I told them in detail everything that I saw when I was in Florida.
The closet, was the evidence, were these things that you saw there, were these things you could actually murder people with or just hurt?
Oh, no.
Not them into submission?
Yeah, hurt them into submission. And, we all know that there were a lot of younger victims. The youngest ones came from Florida. And if she was doing this to those young girls, I'm really, really adamant about, her punishment.
Well, clearly, having all the information, having seen the evidence, if you were still not called to the witness stand, I wonder why, Rina, you don't want to tell this to the world firsthand. Maybe you should. Maybe we'll get to the bottom of it. But Barry, you've written these books, The Spider, about Epstein and his circle of influence, but also a book on all the president's women, Donald Trump, and the making of a predator. And you wrote this 6 years ago. Can you tell us about the Trump-Epstein connection, and is there anything incriminating that you think is actually being covered up?
Well, that's a very, very good question, because that could be behind the reason that these files are still being held up by the government, by President Trump. Now, we know that it has been disclosed and confirmed that there are several references to him in the files. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, his Attorney General here in the U.S., has confirmed that fact. But we don't know what those references are. Something that was disturbing to me that I wrote about in my book was a party that Donald Trump threw with more than a dozen women. These were girls from a what was called then a calendar girls competition. These were beauty contestants, and the only guest at that party was Jeffrey Epstein. So you had these two men, and all of these weren't underage girls, but they were young women, and it was just the two of them. And the organizer, as I quoted him in my book, who Donald Trump called to put this party together, he said that he had warned Donald Trump that Jeffrey Epstein had a very, very bad track record with these, with girls and stories that he had been told. And this man didn't want to bring these women to Donald Trump's estate. But he said he talked to Donald Trump about it, and Donald Trump dismissed the allegations and said, we're just out to have a good time, and it's happening at my house, and I'm in charge, and there won't be any issues. And we're not aware that any, real issues came out of that particular party. But it shows you the mindset that these two men had at the time. Donald Trump has a track record. As I reported in my book, there were more than 24 women who made allegations against him of sexual misconduct and sexual harassment. He's had to pay now E. Jean Carroll over $80 million in a civil judgment against him from a trial here in New York based on her defamation claims. True. After he denied claims that he had raped her at a department store here in New York. So there's a history to Donald Trump as a predator. And of course, you had a friendship between these two men. Now, I will point out...
Including a 2003 birthday party and the very now infamous birthday card, suggestive birthday card that has been doing the rounds, which has been called fabricated by the White House. Do you think these files will ever come out? Will they see the light of day?
Well, again, and I think it's important to point out that federal authorities thus far have said that Donald Trump wasn't under any investigation of wrongdoing, with his association with Jeffrey Epstein. However, we won't know the real truth until these more than 100,000 pages of documents that the FBI, as Rina said, that they've been collecting on Jeffrey Epstein going back for decades now. And until those files are released, we won't know the real story, the story that Americans deserve to know.
Do you agree with Barry on what he has to say about Donald Trump?
I personally have never met Donald Trump. I have been to several of his country clubs, actually. In fact, I have a lot of friends who are art collectors that are friends with Donald Trump. I can't agree or disagree. I have not seen any of this in person, but I can say that he is a witness. He has witnessed Jeffrey Epstein in action. He has previously said that he's into younger girls, like he likes, many girls, women, and they're on the younger side. So he definitely saw Jeffrey with these women and girls. So he is a witness who can testify and tell the government or tell the public what he saw. I've also recently seen evidence that what he said was true. Jeffrey Epstein did go to Mar-a-Lago and he was taking his employees, the girls who worked in the spa area. And he did this on more than one occasion. So that is true. He did not change his story. This evidence, this email is from the year 2007. And I was surprised that one of the Epstein victims had this information, and she showed it to me recently.
That's a big disclosure that you're making. But in the end, do witnesses get called to the witness stand? That's the big question. There are names, there are truths that are buried in the files, but when will the files come out? Is there a connection or not? Or, as the White House says, is every insinuation fabricated? Well, we're hoping we'll get to know the truth sooner than later, but in the meanwhile, the entire process of justice is awaited. And Rina Oh, as a survivor, for you to raise those issues is extremely brave, and we thank you for joining us right here, speaking to Times Now, and thank you very much, Barry Levine, with your insights on this entire issue. Thank you. We'll wait for more disclosures. Well, waiting is all we seem to be doing these days. Thank you.